99.9% of the world still has no idea what a cohort-based course is. When you think of online education, you still think of video-driven courses. Video-driven courses have had over a 10-year head start in terms of penetrating the market and just people knowing what it is. So continuing to educate people on, hey, what is a cohort-based course? This is a new, exciting way that you can learn. That's really, really exciting. And I think it's going to be groundbreaking to be able to connect students from all over the world with instructors that they get to interact directly with.
Welcome to Entrepreneur's Handbook Podcast, where we share inspiring startup stories with practical takeaways for you, the listener. Today's guest is Wes Kao, the co-founder of Maven. It's a platform that enables subject matter experts to teach live cohort-based courses, and instructors include Li Jin, Pompliano, Shaan Puri, and Annie Duke. They've raised over 25 million to date from people such as Andreessen Horowitz and First Round Capital. Wes is an absolute expert in this field, having previously co-founded the AltMBA with Seth Godin. And Maven is a result of her experience from working with so many instructors and so many people who want to create courses to make it as easy as possible for them and to deliver the best possible experience for the students. This is a great conversation and I really hope you enjoy it. So let's get on to the show. Welcome to Entrepreneur's Handbook Quiz. It's a pleasure to have you on.
So excited to be here.
You've got such an interesting background. You've worked with so many amazing people. But for people who aren't aware of you and your background, what made you become an entrepreneur in the first place? Like, how did you get into the whole course-based businesses?
Yeah. So if I dig back into history, I think I was bitten by the entrepreneurship bug quite early. I started a nonprofit in high school where I donated backpacks and school supplies to underprivileged kids, got donations from Target, Walmart, JanSport, different stationery companies. As a 16-year-old, so that was really my first foray into entrepreneurship. And then kind of in adulthood, I worked with Seth Godin and we co-founded the AltMBA together. The AltMBA was our attempt to really challenge the norms of online education at the time. So this was 2014, 2015, and the dominant form of online education was MOOCs, massive open online courses, video-driven courses like the kind that you find on Udemy, LinkedIn Learning. And there's no accountability, no interactivity, no community. You basically watch a bunch of videos by yourself, which, rightfully so, just it's hard to keep ourselves on the hook to not get distracted. And we created the AltMBA as the first cohort-based course to really challenge what online learning could be. So we created this new format. And, at the time, there was a lot of pushback because people were not used to, what is this thing going online, learning with other people who I don't know, turning on my webcam, is it safe? And it wasn't until a couple of years later, I met my co-founder of Maven, Gagan Biyani, who co-founded Udemy a decade beforehand. And, we were kicking around some ideas for what was the future of online education. And he was really excited about, these live interactive courses. And together we named it cohort-based courses. And that term has really taken off. So it's really exciting to see a bunch of people, start using that term and finally give a name to this trend had been brewing since Seth and I started AltMBA in 7 years ago or so now. So I would say that my foray into entrepreneurship was really driven by wanting to solve my own problem, really. At the AltMBA and after, I worked with a bunch of different course creators. Professor Scott Galloway from Section 4, NYU Stern. I worked with the co-founders of Morning Brew, with Tiago Forte and David Perrell from Build Second Brain and Rite of Passage. And I saw the tech stacks that everyone is using, and it was super janky. It was cobbling together a dozen different tools, using Zapier as duct tape to kind of, hold it all together. I have personally spent too many nights staying up trying to figure out how to adjust the column width or the link color of, some landing page platform, and then have it integrate with my email platform and have it integrate with this other thing. And so I don't consider myself very technical of a person, and many course creators, many subject matter experts are also not particularly technical. They can get by with the technology, but that's not the reason that they want to share their knowledge. They want to share their passion on design or people management or UX or accounting or whatever that their topic and their thing is without really having to mess with the technology. So Gagan and I came together. We found our third co-founder, Shreyan Spensali, who was the first engineer and first employee at Venmo. And together we started building Maven. And so it's been 2 years, actually. Just yesterday was our 2-year anniversary of Maven. Can't believe it's gone by so fast.
Just looking at that, like a lot of people would be wondering how you got involved with Seth Godin in the first place. Like, how did that relationship start there? Because obviously, once you've had that experience, that must have helped you a lot. And then you've been able to work with so many amazing people. The people you mentioned there, like the founders of Morning Brew, Tiago Forte, David Perrell. So by the time you came to Maven, you had such a wealth of experience and worked with so many people who are considered leaders in this field as well. So it must have been like just amazing to have that kind of experience.
Yeah, it was pretty phenomenal. I think one of the best parts of consulting and working with so many of these different course creators and experts was getting the behind the scenes look at each one of their businesses and really being a thought partner for them to dream up what could a course business look like for you. But going back to your earlier question of how did I start working with Seth Godin, it was very serendipitous. So, I get asked this question a lot, and I try to think about what's the nugget that can apply to other people, because it partially is so serendipitous. But basically, I was living in SF at the time, and I was wanting to move to New York, and I saw a blog post by Seth Godin saying, hey, I'm looking for a special projects lead to come work with me for 6 months. I just sold off my previous business that I'd been running for 8 years. I'm looking to figure out what should I build next. And I want a thought partner to bounce ideas off of and help just vet different business ideas. And it sounded like a dream role. And, I assumed that so many other people were going to be applying for this role, given, his readership and how many people are huge fans of him, that, for my application, you had to submit a video. And I did my video in one take. I just thought there's just no way I'm going to get this. I don't want to be too emotionally invested. So I did in one take, and I was shocked then a couple days later to see Seth Godin in my inbox saying, hey, Wes, loved your video, loved your application. Let's hop on a call for an interview. So, we did multiple rounds of interviews. I eventually got the role, moved cross country, packed my life into 6 suitcases to a tiny apartment sight unseen in this little town called Hastings-on-Hudson, which is right outside of the city where Seth's office is based. And what initially started off as a 6-month role eventually ended up being over 3 years working together, working on different projects, and then eventually the AltMBA. And then Seth asked me to stay on and run the AltMBA if I would be willing to. And of course, that was an obvious yes for me. And so that's kind of how it all started. I would say that, the nugget here, because it's kind of, it can be a little too serendipitous, I think, to try to replicate this, but I would say that working on interesting projects and sharing your point of view around your craft is huge. So at that point, I started writing my blog in 2010. So I've been writing it for, over 12 years now. At that time, I started working with Seth in 2014. So 4 years at that point, I'd been writing. I'd also been running an event series in San Francisco, a storytelling event series. I'd done various side projects, launched different microsites, on different, random things. I'd written for Fast Company, different op-eds, critiquing marketing campaigns from different brands. I, at that time, was at an advertising startup funded by Sequoia. And then before that was in L'Oreal and Gap. So I worked for some interesting brands. And I think that the important thing that I think helped me to stand out in this application among a sea of applications working with Seth was being able to show that I had a strong point of view and I was going to come in and help make things happen. I was not someone who was going to wait to be told what to do. I think, especially when you encounter someone who you're a huge fan of, you kind of assume that they know better, and in many cases they probably do, but they are not looking for someone where they have to give super clear directions on every single thing and, manage every part of your work. They're looking for someone who can come in and help drive the business forward with very minimal direction and help prompt them, in some ways tell them what to do. Right. So I think that is really huge. One, make yourself someone who is interesting, who has a lot to offer and share. and share along the way. Like start now, and leave a trail of breadcrumbs of your thinking, your craft, your point of view. And then second, be someone who makes things happen, that creates forward motion, that isn't just waiting to be told what to do.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that because, well, one, like your CV before you even worked at Seth is obviously amazing. And it's one of those things where it's quite obvious why he wants to work with you if you look at everything you've done. And about making things happen, it happens to me a lot as well, where sometimes people reach out to me, they say they want to work with me, but what they often say is like, I want to do this in the future, but I want to learn from you first. Like, but if you haven't done it, like it's better for me to see you've done something and you've been trying and maybe you made mistakes, but at least you've had a go. Where sometimes people want that security in some ways of saying like, oh, I'm going to do this in the future, but I need to work for you first. But then for somebody, especially at a small level, startup level, you want somebody who's going to just take the initiative and doesn't need me to give you permission to go ahead and do it.
Totally. I feel like you're probably really kind with giving them this advice, but I'll be more direct with them to speak on your behalf here because, I get pitches like that all the time too. And I think that some tough love here is going to change the lives of people who are currently giving that pitch to people that they're reaching out to. So I want to explain the psychology a little bit of someone who is getting a lot of pitches, right? So if you're pitching Amardeep, you saying, hey, Amardeep, I want to be you in the future, but I want to learn from you in the meantime. I don't really know what I'm doing, don't really have any skills to bring to the table. I want you to teach me so that I can be great in the future and go off and do my own thing. Like that is not an appealing pitch to the person receiving that pitch. Like they don't want to teach you from scratch and then have you go off and do your own thing. Like that's just, you need to think about what would be appealing to the person receiving this pitch. What would make their life better? How would they benefit? Not how would I benefit? We all know how you would benefit. You would benefit because you get to learn from someone who's great at podcasting, great at storytelling, has nailed it, and done this for a bunch of years. Like you don't need to share how you would benefit because the other person implicitly assumes you will benefit if you're reaching out to them already. So you really need to make the note, whatever pitch, whether it's a DM, whether it's an email, 90% about the recipient that you are pitching. So talk about the energy that you have, the willingness to do whatever it takes, the fact that you've already started messing around with this software, the fact that, you love the way he edits this thing and you know how to edit that way, right? Like, how are you going to make his life easier, right? Like, I think a lot of people, the other problem is people come and they're like, oh, I want to work on strategy. I want to work on whatever. And it's like, even for the person who is, managing everything, even the strategy part is a tiny part of the part that they actually do on a daily basis. So you coming in and saying like, hey, Amardeep, these things might be a little bit harder for you or a little bit more of a slog. I can take all of that off your plate so that you can focus more on strategy, so that you can focus more on the vision of your podcast and what direction you want to take it and different things you want to explore or different formats you want to experiment with. Because I can take all of the stuff that you don't want to do and I can do that. So especially if you are starting out, especially if you're pitching someone, like have the humility to take on all the stuff that the other person doesn't want to do. That is how you will make yourself indispensable and incredibly valuable, and how you will earn the goodwill for them to want to teach you, right? When you approach them and you are someone random, you're bringing no value to the table and just wanting to take from them, take their time and their learnings, like there's very little incentive for people to want to help you. So I think that make it 90% about that other person is so, so important. Like literally look at your note, read it through the lens of what about this benefits me? What about this benefits the other person? And straight up delete all the shit that doesn't benefit the other person. All the stuff that benefits you, go ahead and delete it. It'll trim your note. It'll be much tighter and you are much more likely to get a yes.
Yeah, and that's great advice. And the other thing I find as well is that there's a lot of like ego stroking that goes on as well. And what I've realized is that somebody like you, for example, right, you must get tons of people messaging you about how amazing you are. And you kind of sometimes know that they're doing that because they then will probably ask you for something in the future. Whereas if you're pitching somebody pitching you, you already know what you've done. You don't need somebody to email you and tell you, oh, you've done this, this, and this. Like that, you already know that. What you need to know is how they can help you. And sometimes I think people try to be maybe too sugary sweet about like, oh, I love this, I love this, I love this. It's like, yeah, why are you saying this sometimes? Like, And it really depends,
Yeah.
because sometimes people are just being genuine, but sometimes it's like, oh, I love this, and this. And then you say thank you. And then the next reply is like, oh, like, I'd love to pick your brain. It's like,
Right. Yeah. I think this is a great point to keep in mind for job interviews too. Because I interview a lot of candidates, and a lot of people will spend quite a bit of time in the first, 30-minute screening interview, or first intro interview, talking about how much they love the company or the mission, or whatever else in the industry. And that's great. And you definitely want to show that you're passionate about, the company specifically. But to your point, the founder, or the hiring manager already knows why the company is great. Like, this is why they're there. Like, right? So you don't want to waste that precious time. If you only have 30 minutes or an hour, or, a couple paragraphs in an email to get your point across, you really want to make every line count. And the candidates that jump out to me are ones who, express a little bit upfront why they're so excited. And they share that excitement, not by saying, oh, because, Maven has done this and this and this already, but they share their excitement by saying, here's where I think there's potential. Here's what I want to do at Maven. Here's how I want to make Maven grow even faster than it already is. Here's what I want to build for you, with you, right? So they're still showing their excitement. They're just not rattling off a list of things that, accomplishments that the company's already done, but rather they're showing it by looking forward. They're looking ahead with saying, here's the value that I can contribute. And really, like, even once you get hired, you should still think that way. Like, I still think that way on a daily basis. On every single day, I'm like, how can I add more value today than I did yesterday? What's the most highly leveraged thing that I can do to move the business forward? So that mentality of constantly thinking about, what value can I add? How can I help the business grow? How can I make my boss's life easier? That getting into that habit is really it's a lifelong habit, and it's going to reap rewards immediately and forever in the future.
With Maven, like, you obviously had a lot of experience before you founded it. What lessons did you take from the other companies you worked at in terms of, like, forming the values of the company and, like, the practices of how you, like, expanded?
Yeah. So my background is in marketing. And, I think every marketer knows how hard it is to acquire and retain customers, to get customers in the door. And so, I think one thing that is kind of common with founders, especially first-time founders, is thinking about, if you build this amazing product, people will just come, right? It's that Sandlot's movie, if you build it, they will come. And that's just not true. Because I've personally built and have seen a bunch of products that I thought were great, and no one came. Crickets and tumbleweed, radio silence, and it's pretty demoralizing. And so, for me, thinking right from the beginning about acquisition, customer acquisition, about go-to-market strategy, about distribution. If you have a great product but no one hears about it, it's like the tree in the forest that falls. Like, did anyone hear it? Who knows? No one was there, right? So really thinking about distribution, thinking about how are we going to get in front of people who would buy this, or get in front of people who would spread this or be excited about it. Thinking about distribution right from the beginning. I think that is one of the things that I really, a lesson that has only become more salient over the years. I feel like early Wes, past Wes from 15 years ago, thought that if the product were good enough, we don't have to do much marketing. And that's just not the case. And so when starting Maven, Gagan, Trans, and I thought a lot about, how do we get in front of people who would be glad to know that Maven exists? How do we, think about distribution really early on and really kick off with a bang?
And how did you kick off with a bang? Like, what strategy did you use?
Yeah. So the first year and a half of business was focused more on creators. In the last 6 months or so, we've broadened that to be not only creators, but also subject matter experts. And we started off by first having a lot of angel investors who were creators. So they had skin in the game. They're on our team as an angel investor. We specifically ran a crowdfunding campaign after our initial fundraising round to get even more interest from people who were excited about the future of education, who were excited about courses and the creator economy. So really getting people in our corner who are excited about the same things, right? So building that community, I think, really, really upfront. And then second, tapping into people who already had expertise that people wanted to learn from. So our initial courses, we had Pomp, who, has a huge following on crypto. He taught a course about Bitcoin. We had Li Jin teach a course about the creator economy, a little bit meta, but she has amazing insights on trends within the creator economy. She taught this course to fellow venture capitalists and founders. So we had these really incredible thought leaders teaching topics that were not taught anywhere else in a format that was way more interactive, way more community driven, live, that just wasn't widely available elsewhere. So we started off by thinking about, what would be really juicy for students to want to learn, and how do we structure this in a way that is going to be really compelling for instructors. All of these instructors are busy people who have a lot going on in their lives. They have a lot of they have a high opportunity cost with all the other things that they could be doing. So how do we structure this so that we take the heavy lifting off of building cohort-based course, teach them how to build a course, and make it a no-brainer for them. And so really what came out of the first few courses that we worked on, the first few months of Maven, led to creating the Maven Course Accelerator, which is a 2-week course that I teach that teaches anyone who's interested in building a course how to do that. So starting from thinking about what topic should you teach, to who's your target student, how do you price your course, how long should it be, how do you put together a curriculum. A lot of experts are downloading 10, 15 years of expertise out of their heads. Like, there's a lot of potential topics you could teach about. How do you narrow that scope and really shape that course so that it's the appropriate chunk for your students to learn and be able to practice? How do you market your course so that you get in front of the right people and nurture them over time and get them to convert? So really that end to end of everything you need to build to have a successful course, we teach that in this free program that I teach. And so that's been another huge way to, again, build community, offer a ton of value, and offer a ton of goodwill, because this is a free program that, there are other programs like this charging $5,000, $6,000 for teaching you how to build courses. We're offering it completely for free. So it's a great way to show our credibility and thought leadership that we have in the space, while building great relationships with experts who a lot of students would want to learn from.
Yeah, and like the list of names there you had, like, they're all amazing. And how did you convince some of them to come on board and to teach their course? Like you said, they're so busy. What was the kind of levers you could pull? How did you get them to believe in what you're doing?
Yeah, so there were a couple different ways. Once you get the first few, the next 10, 20, 30, 50, 100, and now we have over hundreds of instructors on the platform. The next batch become easier, but for the first few, I think people want to know that you're not going to waste their time. When you approach them with something new and it feels risky, you really have to de-risk it. And so when we approached this initial set of instructors, I shared examples of the revenue numbers that AltMBA was making. The fact that I had built this first cohort-based course from scratch with Seth Godin, counted for a lot, and then gone on to build a bunch of other courses with other people that this set of instructors knew the names of. So thinking about how do you de-risk, whether that's with social proof, showing your credibility, showing your track record. So that helped a lot. And then the other part was acknowledging the reasons they might push back proactively. So I knew that they were very busy. And so saying, hey, you need to spend, all this time building your course was probably not going to land. And so we said, hey, for a limited time, we're going to help you work alongside you to build this course. So obviously you're still going to have to do work because these are ideas in your head, and we need you to express them with high enough fidelity that it can be in a course. We can't just summarize what's in your head. So we're going to need to work closely with you, but we're happy to do a lot of the heavy lifting with helping you decide some key elements of a course so you can shape it and take a lot of that worry of, hey, is this going to work? Or is my course too long? Is it too intense? Is it too short? Is it too fluffy? We're going to be that thought partner for you to make sure it's strong and give our stamp of approval on it. And so offering to work alongside these creators and give this great advice counted for a lot. And then I'm also a huge fan of tactics that keep on giving. So you're doing things in your past self and your present self, doing things your future self would thank you for. So all of the process that we built helping this initial set of instructors, we then turned into the Maven Course Accelerator. So the Maven Course Accelerator wasn't like, oh, we're building from scratch now. Like, how do we build our own course? It was, no, like, we've been helping a bunch of instructors, documenting the process along the way, marking down the questions that they had, things that we could have explained better, things that we hypothesized but were wrong about, or things that worked well that we want to double down on. We were gathering all of that along the way so that when we built the Maven Course Accelerator, it was much more efficient to build. So really, I think the tip there is thinking about what can I do to set my future self up for success? If there's anything that I could be doing now that's kind of low lift along the way that would be higher lift later on, start doing those things because that can, continue to pay dividends for you later on.
Yeah, I think part of the reason why Maven's done well as well is so with the MOOC world is that anybody can create a course and there's not that quality curation kind of side of things. And a lot of people, the students, they want to know that they're taking something which is going to give them value. So it's both sides, right? If you know you come to Maven and you've got the courses by the name you've said, but you also know that it's been structured correctly, there's been a lot of thought that's gone into that. It's not just a money grab, which you see with a lot of people who, I see it all the time, right? Somebody's written for 2 months and they said, okay, I'm going to write a writing course now and sell it for 1,000. And then somehow they convince people to buy it. And like on Maven, you've got that quality assurance where the people who are doing the courses actually know what they're talking about as well.
Yeah, great question. First, it's pretty terrifying to see people who have been doing something for only 2 months teaching about it. So I also see that on Twitter, being shared, and I'm always terrified by that. So the instructors that come through Maven are usually more experienced than that. They're subject matter experts who have credibility in their field. They've done it before. They, have a track record of success. The exciting thing that we were talking about before this is that we are launching Course Marketplace in a couple weeks. And, the exciting thing about that is there's going to be hundreds of courses on Maven where where students will be able to see what they want to learn, and not all the courses will be available, all at once because cohort-based courses are time-based, but there's going to be a huge selection of courses where students will be able to learn from someone that they really resonate with, right? So I think the interesting thing here is that, as a marketplace, like Airbnb, for example, can't anoint, hey, this apartment can be on Airbnb, but this one can't. There's kind of a democratic vibe and a democratic approach to marketplaces. So we're excited about that because, I think for too long, there have been too many gatekeepers preventing people to launch, right? Even with something like LinkedIn Learning, like you need to be picked by one of their editors. You can't just put your course on there and start teaching to your own audience on LinkedIn, right? So there's a lot of gatekeepers traditionally, universities, even more gatekeepers. So we're really excited about this marketplace where, okay, as an instructor, you can put your course on there and you should have a baseline of credibility, and everyone has to go through the Maven Course Accelerator to be onboarded. So everyone has at least gone through this 2-week training program. But then the market gets to decide, do they want your courses or not? I think the other piece that's really exciting for students is having a one-stop destination where you can see a bunch of courses that are coming up. I think right now with even with the clients that I used to work with for cohort-based courses, it's kind of they're kind of their own islands on the internet. Whereas if you think about even Udemy, going to Udemy and being able to scroll a bunch of courses, or Skillshare, or even your local university for the fall semester, you can see, hey, there's all these courses coming up. Do I want to learn some of this stuff, right? So it's very convenient for students to be able to go to one place and see, hey, these are all the courses coming up. And there might be multiple people teaching on the same thing. And you get to decide, do I want to learn angel investing from this person or this person, or design from this person or this person? There's instructors with very different styles just because they're teaching the same topic. They could have very different approaches and spiky points of view, as I like to call it. And you can see what resonates with you as a student. And be able to compare across different courses and whatnot. So I think this is a really, really big launch that we're so excited about and have been working on for the past few months. So pretty excited to see that come out.
Just to check, what date is the launch?
September 13th is when we are posting it publicly, and the 15th is our product launch.
So if you're listening right now, it should be at least September 15th. So everything that Wes just said is already live, so go and check it out. And you said the full launch is being announced on the 13th. Can you let us know what's in there? Because it would have already been announced by the time this comes out.
Yeah. So we are doing a relaunch of Maven.com, the entire site, the entire platform. So, if you look at the site today, the website is entirely geared towards instructors. So, there are some courses, on there that are student facing, and you can scroll through the courses that we have. But everything is very much geared towards speaking to instructors and saying like, hey, do you want to teach? Come join us. And that's because we were mainly wanting to build up the supply of courses. So that's what we've been doing for the past year and a half, is building the supply. And now we are focusing on the demand. So with students, hey, like, here are all these high quality, amazing courses. Come take a look and see if you're interested in any of them. So the new website is going to have way more courses on it, front and center on the main page. If you scroll, there's going to be different categories of courses, different collections. So collections around courses that are most relevant for startup founders and CEOs, or courses that are most relevant for engineers, courses that are most relevant for solopreneurs, or marketers or designers, in-house operators. So there's different collections, kind of themed collections, and there's new sections around courses that are upcoming, that are trending. So a lot more variety that you're going to see, a much bigger selection of courses. And then, of course, we also do have the another page for teaching on Maven. If someone comes to the site and is interested in teaching, there's a whole page that tells you more about that and shares many more examples of instructors and what they've done and ways that we support instructors. So yeah, so it's much more student focused, tons of courses available. And then behind the scenes too, if an instructor joins, the product itself, the features are much more robust as well on the back end.
I think what you mentioned earlier as well is like you're solving a quite important problem, because you mentioned people like Tiago Forte and David Perrell, where a lot of the times most cohort courses from big creators or people with a lot of expertise is all based on their website, which means that it's quite difficult to find unless you already know of the person. It's quite hard to discover that. And one thing I've realized from being in this world for a little while now is that sometimes there's people who are doing incredible stuff, but unless you happen to be in that bubble, you just don't know about it. Whereas on somewhere like Maven, if these courses are all listed in one place, then you know what you want to learn, and you might discover, and like I've done it all the time, right? You think, I've never heard of this person before. I go to their Twitter and they've got like 5 million followers. Like, how did that happen? But there's a huge number of people doing amazing things. And I think something like Maven, where it has a list of things by different topics, could actually be really helpful for many people out there who maybe don't like naturally fit into the audiences or the social media side that they might discover some of these course creators otherwise.
Absolutely. That discovery piece, I think, is one of the most exciting parts of the launch. I've definitely felt the same, where, you stumble on someone's content and you're almost upset that you didn't realize that they existed sooner, right? It's like, oh my God, I love this stuff. Like, how have I not been following you all along? And it's even more salient with the instructors that we have, because a lot of them are not necessarily Twitter famous. Like, there's a certain subset of people who are great at their craft and are Twitter famous, but there's a whole bunch of people who are great at their craft, but aren't, have not been spending a huge amount of time building a public facing audience. They've been too busy working, internally at their companies, right? Developing a track record, working at, on really interesting projects. They're not trying to build their email list. They're not trying to, grow on Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever. And so there's so many of these subject matter experts that are now teaching on Maven that even if you were on social, you might not find very much on their presence there. But if you talk to anyone within their industry, within their circle, they would know that that is the go-to person. If you want to learn about X, that's the go-to person. We're really excited about surfacing experts who you otherwise might not find, and offer you that opportunity to learn directly from them.
I think it's a common thing as well for, say, people in the creative world to kind of forget that like building a successful business or being good at one part of business in particular doesn't necessarily the same help you get big on Twitter or get big on social media. And people think sometimes like, oh yeah, like naturally those fit together. And it could be somebody's great at what they do, like you said, but they don't really want to post on Twitter. It doesn't make them any less good at what they do. It's just different interests. And sometimes the people who shout loudest on social media, they're the ones you hear about and might be the course you buy. But in fact, it could be somebody else who maybe has 2 followers, who's actually got really amazing insights. And they could find those on Maven because, like I said, it's famous in the family. The people who know their stuff will recommend those courses.
Yeah, I love that you brought up that point, because I think that more often than not, the norm is that there are a ton of very credible people who don't have a huge audience. That actually the people who are credible and have an audience are in the minority. That is actually rare. The majority of people that, when I think of who would I go to ask, a question on blank where I would really trust an answer, they do not have audiences. They're that just wasn't and isn't something that they were prioritizing, And so, it's kind of like, it almost reminds me of school projects. Think back to high school, doing a group project. There's, 3, 4, 5 people working on something, and whoever presents and speaks the most during the presentation of your project, the teacher assumes that that person did all the work, when really behind the scenes, it could have been, the other 3 people, right? And usually was the other 3 people who just might not have felt as comfortable presenting publicly and sharing publicly, right? And so the person who's comfortable sharing and talking and, gets all the credit. And I've always found that to be extremely unfair. So I still have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, because I was that person doing the work behind the scenes, not the one that felt very comfortable speaking up. Speaking up more and being more active on social is something that is a recent behavior of mine. So, I've grown my audience on Twitter in the last year and a half, but for the first 8 years that I was on Twitter, I had less than 1,000 followers. So, and I'd been writing my blog for over 12 years, and for the majority of that time, I had like 5 people reading it. So so I understand, there are a lot of people who are very credible who want to work on their craft, but not necessarily, don't necessarily have an audience. And I think it's such a gift that to be able to access their knowledge and be able to learn directly from them.
And looking forward now, so you've got this big launch that's just happened by the time this podcast is released. What's the future looking like? What are you most inspired by? What are you most excited by that's in Maven's future, or even more generally in your other side projects?
I don't have side projects. Maven, it requires all of my time here. But I think the part that I'm most excited about is serving students. I think, being able to offer so many more courses on a diverse range of topics. We're starting with a couple key avenues, a couple key themes around business, startups, starting your own thing, and clustering around a certain set of topics. But we have big ambitions to expand beyond those topics and to continue offering courses of various kinds that will support operators, founders, leaders, creators in advancing their careers and meeting their goals. So that's a huge one, is offering more and more variety of courses. And then the other piece that you had mentioned, the discovery, being able to better recommend courses to you as a student. So, if you've taken this course, you might enjoy these other courses. A lot of times, like as a marketer, I'm not only taking courses on marketing, I also love taking courses on people management, on organizational behavior, on product, on communication, on writing. So whatever our fields are, there are adjacent categories that complement what we do. And so being able to suggest to someone, hey, you took this course, these other ones might be interesting for you. I think that's really, really exciting. And then third, bringing on even more supply of courses. So I think there's right now we are barely scratching the surface on cohort-based courses. It is so new, the AltMBA being one of the first, if not the first, commercially successful cohort-based course back in 2014, 2015. Since then, there's been a whole bunch that have emerged onto the scene. And now there are a whole bunch more, but 99.9% of the world still has no idea what a cohort-based course is. When you think of online education, you still think of video-driven courses. Video-driven courses have had over a 10-year head start in terms of penetrating the market and just people knowing what it is. So continuing to educate people on, hey, what is a cohort-based course? This is a new, exciting way that you can learn. That's really, really exciting. And I think it's going to be groundbreaking to be able to connect students from all over the world with instructors that, they get to interact directly with. We have students in dozens of different countries, hundreds of different cities who are all logging on at the same time. They're passionate about the same things, being able to give each other feedback, work on group projects, discuss different ideas, ship work together, like that's huge. So I'm very excited about more people just realizing that this modality of live learning exists now and is something that you can tap into.
You talked about what people are enjoying the most in the courses, but what do you enjoy most about what you're doing at Maven right now? And then also, what do you find the hardest about what you're doing at Maven?
Ooh, yeah. Gosh, the hardest thing really, it varies on a day-to-day basis. So, both what I love about it and what is challenging is that on any given day, there are times when I think I'm a genius. Like, this is absolutely going to work. Like, I'm so excited about this. We've got this in the bag. And then a couple hours later, this is never going to work. Like, I have no idea what's going to happen. This is a shot in the dark, or, I don't know how to solve this problem. Right. So it's the ups and downs, I think, that are both energizing. The fact that I get to work on a problem with non-obvious solutions, I think is just a huge gift. With a team that is so sharp and intellectually challenges me, and we can do that for each other. And I talk about iron sharpens iron. I think is huge. But there are a lot of the anxiety of not knowing how something is going to turn out. I think that is very common for anyone working on anything new. Really, like whether it's a company or a project or even something that feels as quote unquote small as changing up the format of an article that you're writing, or a podcast episode, or whatever, right? Like anything that's new, I think it comes with that question mark of like, oh, if I change things up, like, is it going to make things better or actually worse? And like, how is this going to turn out? That fear of the unknown. Yeah, so that can be hard sometimes, but I think the aliveness that I feel from getting to work on Maven outweighs that, and the mission of what we are working on, I feel like is so important and really needs to exist in the world, that it, that anxiety and, the worry feels very much worth it.
So, love talking to you today. Where can people hear more about Maven and also hear more about you?
Yes, you can find out more about Maven at maven.com and at MavenHQ on Twitter. And you can find me at Wes_Kao on Twitter and weskao.com.
Perfect. Thanks so much for coming on.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This is great.